Hello, friends and foe alike. Welcome to my YouTube channel. The rumors you heard are real. I have a mustache now. Now, in all seriousness, today we're going to talk about drum heads and changing the sons of bitches, right? And if you want a short answer to the question of whether or not you should be changing your drum heads often enough to make your playing as well as your recording sound subsequently better, that short answer is a yes. Now, if you're like me, which you probably are if you're watching this YouTube channel, you're wondering, is it really necessary if you're recording in less than ideal recording environments, as well as you don't got the dough to be spending out to buy a set of new drum heads every 6 months, which is usually like the recommended period people say you need new drum heads. Luckily for me, my mama bought me new drum heads this Christmas so we could do some testing to kind of figure it out, which is what you saw in the intro to this video. We're going to dive deeper into that in a second. But first we get to the further testing, I just want to talk about the general recording environment and ethos I usually have when recording drums in my little space here. Now, first of all, as I just mentioned, the acoustics in this room are absolutely terrible. I'm going to move this omnidirectional microphone in the middle of this room here and play a little bit, and don't do any EQ, no compression, none of that, just so you get the natural sound of the room. And it's pretty close to what I hear in my ears if I play without any muffling or anything like that. So I'm gonna do that real quick, just so you get an idea of really how bad it sounds in here and kind of how well I've been able to move my microphones around over the years and try to learn how to make the drums sound best in this room. So let's do that real quick. The next thing I wanted to talk about is the monetary aspect of changing your drum heads every 6 months. It's, pretty expensive to put out a whole new set for your drums. Like if you're doing, a 3-piece drum set and both your bass drum heads, you're probably looking at around $150 if I had to guess, depending on, which drum heads you get. So, that's a pretty significant dent on your pocket, especially if you are a young kid and you don't got the cash money to be spending around on drum heads, right? The third aspect I wanted to touch upon is tuning your drum heads. And related to that is just time, right? And because I don't record music for a living and I got a big boy job and all this and girlfriends and families and this and that, I unfortunately don't have as much time as I would like to spend setting up my recording environment, especially the drums when I'm recording a song, whether it be by myself or with my friends, right? And to properly tune a whole set of drums, it probably takes you around an hour, maybe 30 minutes, I don't know, somewhere around there. Either way, that's a significant amount of time if I'm trying to do a recording session after work with my friend and we only have, from like 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. to do some recording, right? That 30 minutes is a pretty big chunk of tuning. Now, I'm not saying you need to tune every recording session, but I'm going to be honest with you here. I probably don't tune my drums for like 6 to 12 months at a time. I'm like, listen, I hear the booze, Listen, do as I say, not as I do. I admit, this is not ideal. You should not be going that long between drum head tuning. To be fair, the snare drum, which is the most important part of the drum, or the drum set rather, I tune that more, because that really has a significant effect on the character of the drum set sound as a whole. Now seriously, let's take a moment and look at the condition in which my Ludwig Acrylite snare drum is in. This is so unideal. I mean, you would think I did this for the video to make these snare wires hang like this. No, like this is how it actually is in normal conditions. I've said this before in other videos. I literally ran over this snare drum on accident on the way to the gig, and it's still chugging along. You know what I mean? So this is, this is kind of why I call myself a garage rock musician, right? I kind of use that word garage as some magic hand waving to make all my terrible recording and musician habits kind of cool and hip, So if you want a quick way to make your music sound better, just say you're a garage musician. It works. I'm telling you, okay? All this to say is, unfortunately, I don't have the money, time, or the determination to keep my drum set up to the standards that you would get in a actual recording studio. And that's why I mentioned earlier before, you know, if you're like me in your recording environment like this, it's a different situation than if you are in a professional recording studio. If you're in a professional recording studio, you should be tuning before every session, and you should be getting drum heads probably every 6 months, right? Okay. So let's get to the actual testing. I've talked enough. The 3 conditions we're going to do is my normal drum heads in my normal state when I come home from work and I'm ready to record, untuned for 6 to 12 months at a time. Nothing special, right? That's how I record 99% of the time. The second way we're going to look at it is if I spend the time and completely retune each of the drums from scratch, right? From hand tightening to proper tuning. Then the third condition is new heads with the same exact tuning done on all of the drum heads. I'm going to match it as close as feasibly possible. Now, the drum head tuning approach I'm taking, or method rather, I talked about in a previous video, which I will link somewhere in the description or some shit that you could click. I really recommend this drum tuning method if you are tone deaf like me, okay? So the song that I'm using today to kind of, showcase the analysis here was a really quick tune I put together, so I apologize for the weirdness of it and the kind of the not so great playing abilities. I'm also using, just for the sake of sticking with the garageness, so to speak, the acoustic guitar I'm using is a free guitar I got from someone, and the strings on it are probably around 5 years old. So it fits into the whole old drumhead shtick that I'm talking about. Before I get people telling me, no, you did your fucking tests wrong, you should have did this, you didn't tune them right, you're blah, 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 you should have put foam, blah, blah, blah. Do your own fucking video. Whenever I do these all these like head-to-head analysis videos, it's always for my own sake. Like, I was genuinely curious, you know, how much of a difference it's really going to be in a full mix of a full song. Because playing them just alone is going to sound different, okay? But in a full mix, is it really necessary for me, Mario DeSanto, to be buying drum heads every 6 months and retuning every session or so, okay? So if you don't like my fucking video, make your own and put it in the comments, and then we could all trash it. All right, let's just get to the comparisons now. Let's go, baby. Okay, so for all of the drum tracks, it's going to be a combination of 2 microphones. The first being a ribbon microphone that is about 3 feet and chest height in front of the whole drum kit. That's getting the majority of the drum sound. The second microphone is going to be pointed at the snare. It's an omnidirectional EV635A. That's going to be picking up a lot of the snare, a little bit of the toms, a little bit of the hi-hat, and a little bit of the bass drum. I'm applying some really heavy-handed EQ to both these drum tracks to compensate for some inconsistencies in the acoustics in my room, and both of these microphones are also going to be sent through a compressor for some parallel compression. So first things first, let's just listen to the 3 conditions as standalones. I want you to get really acquainted with the raw drum tracks in each state, and then we're going to further loop them so we can get a better indication of the differences of the 3 conditions. Now let's listen to these tracks looped so we get a better idea of how they compare to one another. You know, to quickly recap, the old heads that were retuned sound pretty similar to the old heads that were untuned. Obviously, they were a little higher pitched because I had retuned them. Sounds a little jazzier, a little more attack because the heads are a little tighter. But overall, really not that much of a difference. Maybe the bass drum was a little tiny bit punchier, but that might have been just because that strip on my channel was a little different than the other channel, so it really very similar. And then the new heads, as far as the tone of the toms go, was pretty much identical to the old heads that were retuned. They sounded jazzier. The bass drum definitely sounded like it had more room and air to it. Definitely a jazzier sound, more resonance, definitely noticeable on the standalone track. The snare was the biggest difference here between each of the three tracks, and something I want to point out, and it isn't something I noticed until making of the editing of this video, is that the snare drum for the new head sounds really different. And I was getting a lot of snare buzz whenever I was hitting the high tom. And, in my room I get a lot of snare buzz, but it was like really pronounced, and I couldn't figure out why. I kept trying to retune it. I kept trying to, do some other tricks to get rid of the snare buzz. It wasn't until editing this video that I realized that they had sent me a Diplomat snare side head instead of an Emperor snare side head. And the Diplomat is 2 millimeters thick, and I believe the Emperor is 5 milliliters thick. So they are much different heads, and it's really not fair to compare the two, and it kind of ruins a little bit of the comparison for this video. But really the only change there is the snare buzz, and it's going to be a little more responsive when I'm hitting that snare. So when I do my little frills on the snare, it's going to be a little more crisp. So just keep that in mind for all these tests. All right, now's the real test. We're going to listen to the 3 drum conditions in context of a full mix, and really this is what I wanted to do this video for. I wanted to see how much of a difference it really had in a full recorded song. So let's go ahead and start looping some of the shiz. So this is a great example of what I was talking about before. The old heads, both regular and retuned, sound very similar in regards to the bass drum and snare sound. It is really only when you get to the new head comparison where the bass drum is a lot punchier, little more resonance there as well, and the snare drum is a lot more crisp, but once again, that is mainly due to the different snare side drum head that is much thinner than in the other conditions. Now let's loop some of the fills, and you could really hear the difference between the toms here. Once again, try to ignore the snare buzz in the new head condition because that's merely because of the snare side head. Alright, so in conclusion, I don't know about you guys, but I was pretty damn surprised. I don't think I'm going to be changing my drum heads for quite some time, and I'm really not going to feel that bad about tuning them so little either. Besides my snare drum, I mean, like, really the toms, which was kind of the biggest difference here, you know, between the old heads that were retuned and the new heads that were tuned the exact same way, I mean, they were very similar sounding. Now, these are coated drum heads, so I know that's going to have an effect on it. Maybe you would have a bigger difference if you had clear heads. Maybe those heads sound more old, so to speak. But honestly, like, I was really surprised. I even liked the untuned old heads more than any. Like, to me, for my type of music, it seemed to fit into the garage rock sound, so to speak. And just to show you how much I stand by that opinion, I'm going to take off the new snare side head and, excuse me, and I'm gonna put on my old head that's what, three years old. I'm actually gonna do that. Like, I stand by my decision that, like, in this room, for me, Mario Salvatore DeSanto, we're not changing drum heads anymore, baby. We're going 25 years. All right, maybe not that much, but, you know, I'm really not gonna rush. Maybe every 4 years, that's good enough for me, baby, all right? Hopefully we learned something. Hopefully I upset some people. And I'll see you next time, baby. We might have a mustache. You might not have a mustache. Who knows? All right. See you guys later.